האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov, good evening, Dober Vietcher. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parshas Mishpatim. We're going to do Os Beis, section number 2, which is a very long section, so we'll just do the first part of it. And before we begin, we're going to take a look at the first pasuk in Parshas Mishpatim. Here it comes, very well-known pasuk. Perek Chaf Aleph, pasuk Aleph, Ve'ele ha-mishpatim asher tosim lifnehem. And these are the ordinances, are the judgments that you should place before them. The word mishpatim here refers to civil laws that the Parsha will talk about. And these are the civil laws and ordinances that you should place before them. That's what Hashem says to Moshe. Okay, let's get right into the Zera Shimshon. Os Beis, section 2, Parshas Mishpatim, Medrash Rabbah. And the Medrash Rabbah, it says as follows. Ve'ele ha-mishpatim, and these are the ordinances. David Omar, the famous King David, said in Tehillim, Yiras Hashem Tahora omedes lo'ad. Fear of Hashem is pure, it endures forever. Lama kach, why is that so? Mishum dido be kolebe. Because if it is there, if it is in someone, meaning if yiras Hashem, if fear of Hashem is in a person, if a person has embraced and inculcated yiras Hashem, the fear of Hashem, into his or her being, personality, kolebe, then all of the Torah is there. All of that person's Torah learning will be there too. Yesh Adam Shone Medrash Halacha Agados. However, if a person learns, or you could say, however, a person can learn all of the teachings about the law and the stories in the Torah and Ein Bo Yira, if the person doesn't have Yiras Hashem, if they don't have fear of Hashem, Lav Klum Hu. There's nothing to it. There's nothing there, meaning even their Torah study and their learning will not stay with them. That's the end of the quote from the Medrash Rabbah. So again, Zera Shimshon starts, as he often does, with a small excerpt from the Medrash Rabbah. And as is his derech, as is his way, he's going to pose 3 questions on this little excerpt from the Medrash Rabbah. Tema, this is baffling. Eich toloi mikra zeh she'amar David. How is there a connection between the pasuk that David said in Tehillim about Yiras Hashem, about fear of Hashem being pure and enduring forever? How is that connect im ve'ele ha-mishpatim with these are the laws, or these are the ordinances? That's question 1, and that's the most fundamental question of the piece. So let's pause to understand exactly what the Zera Shimshon is asking here, right? It's a very obvious question, very striking. Ve'ele ha-mishpatim asher tosim lifneim, that pasuk, which is of course the pasuk from the beginning of our Parsha, Parshas Mishpatim, simply says a very simple thing. These are the laws. God, Hashem says to Moshe, these are the laws that you should place before the Jewish people. And then the Parsha goes right into various civil laws about slaves, about avodim, and then later on about other. There's many civil laws in the Parsha, and they are presented. Hashem presents them to Moshe and tells him these are the laws, the civil laws and ordinance you should present to the people. Okay, fine. There doesn't seem to be anything complicated about that pasuk. But the Medrash Rabbah says, well, let's bring in a pasuk from Tehillim that David HaMelech said, that will help us understand the pasuk better. Yiras Hashem tahora omedes lo'ad. Fear of Hashem is pure and it endures forever. Any reader of this will be hard pressed to understand how that pasuk has anything to do, how the 2 psukim have anything to do with each other, and why would you bring in the pasuk about fear of Hashem being pure and enduring forever to the pasuk about these are the ordinances that Hashem told Moshe to place before the Jewish people? So that's the fundamental question here. Zera Shimshon's first question right off the bat. What in the world is the connection between the two psukim that the Medrash Rabbah is trying to connect? Okay. Next question. Next, continuing in the Zera Shimshon. Uma koshe al pasuk zeh. And what problem did the Medrash Rabbah have with ve'ela hamishpatim shemevi hapasuk shel David, that it brought in the pasuk of David from Tehillim? Now that question also takes a little more explanation. That question is saying the Zera Shimshon is actually teaching us something. He has a yesod, he has an assumption, a principle, which is that if the Medrash Rabbah quotes a pasuk from the Torah, and then it brings in and connects to that pasuk, a pasuk, let's say, from somewhere else in the Torah or in Nevi'im and Ketuvim, somewhere else in Tanakh, it must be that the Medrash Rabbah had some unspoken problem with the pasuk in the Torah, and it brought in the pasuk and from somewhere else to help answer that question. So the Zera Shimshon's second question is, what was the Medrash Rabbah's problem with Ve'ela HaMishpatim, the first pasuk in our Parsha? What problem did it have that it felt it needed to bring in and connect to it the pasuk from Tehillim? So the first question was, what possible connection is there between the two psukim at all? And two, what problem did the Medrash Rabbah have with the pasuk in our Parsha that begins our Parsha, that it felt it needed to bring in this pasuk from Tehillim about Yiras Hashem to help us understand our pasuk better? Right? That's the second question. And now the third question. Umahu David Omar. What did the Medrash Rabbah mean when it said that David said, and then it quoted the pasuk from Tehillim? Mali im Omar David o Adam Acher. What difference should it make to us if David said the pasuk or if someone else said it? Hoyololomar hadohu dichsiv. The Medrash Rabbah should have said what it normally says, which is, if it wants to introduce a pasuk to help us understand something in the Torah, it says, Hadohu dichsiv. This idea in this pasuk from the Torah is reflected also in a pasuk in Nevi'im or Ketuvim, and then quote the pasuk in Nevi'im and Ketuvim. It doesn't usually say who was the author of the pasuk that it's quoting. Like if it quotes a pasuk from Mishlei, it doesn't necessarily need to say, and Shlomo HaMelech said in Mishlei the following. It just quotes the pasuk from Mishlei, or from, in this case, or from Tehillim, or from whatever sefer in Tanakh it wants to quote a pasuk from. So why does the Medrash Rabbah go out of its way to say David Amar? It was David who said the following words. Just quote the pasuk, and then we'll understand that the Medrash Rabbah is bringing a pasuk from Tehillim to add something to help our understanding, our support in some way, the pasuk in the Torah. So those are the three questions. Next paragraph. V'nireh, and it would appear, shehamedrash hirgish kusha v've'ela hamishpatim. It must be that the Medrash Rabbah felt that there was some problem with the pasuk of ve'ela hamishpatim. Dimashma keperish Rashi, and actually this problem is explained in Rashi's explanation. Rashi says every time in the Torah when it says ve'ela, and these, in other words, not just ela, these, but ve'ela, and these, mosif al harishonim, the intent of that letter vav, the and, is to add to the things that were said before the word ve'ela was used. Ma harishonim misinai, and what does it teach? What is that vav teaching us here in ve'ela hamishpatim? Just like the things that came before our parsha, meaning in the previous parsha, which was Parshas Yisro, and it contained the Aseres Hadibros, the 10 Commandments. Just like those 10 Commandments, those Aseres Hadivorim were given on Sinai, afelo mi Sinai, so too the laws in our Parsha of Mishpatim were also given on Sinai. Okay, so that's the teaching, that's the Rashi, because Rashi wanted us to understand why our Parsha started with the word ve'ele, and these are the laws, as opposed to just ele hamishpatim, these are the laws, not and these are the laws. So what is the Vav doing there? It's to tell us that these laws in our Parsha of Mishpatim were also given on Har Sinai, just like the laws in the previous Parsha of Yisro, the Aseret Sadibros. Those laws were given at Sinai, of course, and so too these laws in our Parsha of Mishpatim were given at Sinai. Wonderful. So that's what the Vav teaches us, according to Rashi. So now we're continuing on the next page, column on the right, top line. De'ech tisak adatin she'elu hamishpatim lo yihiyu misinai. Here's the problem. How would anyone ever have thought that the Mishpatim, the laws and ordinance in our Parsha, were not from Sinai? The Itzturich Kro L'Raboyinhu, that a pasuk, or actually more technically more correct, a letter, the letter Vav, was necessary in the word Ve'ele, that it was necessary to add that Vav in order to teach us this idea that the laws in our Parsha of Mishpatim were also said at Sinai. Why should that be necessary? Don't we know? Wouldn't we assume that the laws in our Parsha were said at Sinai? V'halo kol haTorah kula miSinai ne'emra. All of the laws and mitzvos in the Torah were said on Har Sinai. So obviously the laws in our Parsha were also said on Har Sinai. Okay, so let's pause for a moment. Zera Shimshon is suggesting that the Medrash Rabbah did in fact have a problem with the first pasuk in our Parsha, Ve'ele HaMishpatim, and the Medrash Rabbah's problem was, why did the Torah put the Vav before the word Ele and say Ve'ele? Why did it do that? As if it needed the Vav to teach us that these laws in our Parsha were also given at Sinai, just like the mitzvos and the previous Parsha of Parshas Yisro. Why would it need to do that when, of course, we would know without the Vav? We should know that the laws given in Parshas Mishpatim, along with all the mitzvos in the Torah, were said at Har Sinai. So the Medrash Rabbah, the Zera Shimshon, theorized that the Medrash Rabbah must have some problem with the pasuk, and now he's answering and saying, in fact, that's true. The Medrash Rabbah did have a problem. This, by the way, was question 2 of the 3 questions in the beginning. As Zera Shimshon is answering, the Medrash Rabbah did have a question on the Parsha, and the question is, was the Vav, why was the Vav really necessary? Wouldn't we know without the Vav that all the laws in Parshas Mishpatim were also said at Sinai, just like the mitzvos in the previous Parsha of Yisro? Wouldn't we know that? That was the problem. Va'af im nomar keterot haraim. And even if we want to say, like the answer to this question, which is given in the Mizrahi commentary on Rashi, Hanizkar La'el B'Samuch, which was mentioned just before this piece, meaning section Aleph on Parshas Mishpatim. This is, of course, section Beis, section 2. And so the Zera Shimshon refers to something that he taught in section 1. Kosher, you'd still have a problem, demai nafkamina, because what practical difference is there? And in order to understand what the Zera Shimshon just said, we need to know very concisely what the Re'aim, what the Mizrahi said that he brought in the previous piece. And that is, the Re'aim said that when the Vav teaches us that the mitzvos that were in our Parsha, that are brought in our Parsha of Mishpatim, were also said at Har Sinai, it's not just teaching us they were said by Hashem at Har Sinai, it's teaching us they were said at Har Sinai with the same events and occurrences as the Aseret Hadibros. For example, just like there was lightning and thunder and all of the other incredible drama and incredible scene of revelation at Har Sinai when the Aseres HaDibros were given, so too those things were present when these mitzvos in Parshas Mishpatim were given on Har Sinai. So Zera Shimshon says, even if we want to bring in that answer, my nafkamina, what difference should that make to us that these mitzvos in Mishpatim were also given with the thunder and the lightning on Har Sinai? That doesn't seem to be a significant enough piece of information for us to understand the Vav here. Umach mazeh. And it's because of this problem, Hevi Apasuk Shel Yiras Hashem Tahora, that the Medrash Rabbah brought in the pasuk from David HaMelech and Tehillim about the fear of Hashem is pure. Okay, so we might say the plot thickens. Now it's getting very interesting. The Zera Shimshon is saying that the Medrash Rabbah, as he theorized, did have a problem on the pasuk, and the problem was, why do we need the vav to connect it to the mitzvos and tell us they were given on Har Sinai? Why do we need that? Wouldn't we know that? And he says, okay, let's continue to theorize. It must be that to answer that question, the Medrash Rabbah brought the pasuk about from Tehillim about the Yiras Hashem, about the fear of Hashem being pure. Now, at this point, there's no way in the world we can understand how that answer works, but he's letting us know that that's how he understands what the Medrash Rabbah is trying to do. Now he'll continue and move ahead and help us understand what Yiras Hashem, what that pasuk has to do with our pasuk. And of course, as we know, he develops ideas and then brings things together. Next paragraph. The Beperikamadis Sanhedrin, in the first chapter of Maseches Sanhedrin, Pligi, there's an argument, I mitzvah liftsoa olo. The Gemara over there has an argument, a debate about whether or not there's a mitzvah for judges in a case to suggest a mediation, a compromise solution, or not. Now let's pause to understand that argument. The Gemara is not arguing about whether or not judges can accept and perform mediation in a case. That absolutely is true. If, let's say, two people have an argument and they come to a judge or they come to a bezdin, and they say, we, instead of having a court case where we're adversarial and we're going against each other, we're friends, we're neighbors, we're not even sure what the law should be, so we would like to receive mediation help. We would like the judge or judges in this case, they don't need to issue a formal ruling for one of us and not against the other one. We would like them to develop a plan through talking to us and come up with a mediation. That's the way mediation works, so that instead of arguing and fighting and trying to prove one another wrong, we'll work together to come up with an equitable mediation and a solution. That for sure is permissible and fine. That's not what the Gemara is arguing about. The Gemara in Sanhedrin is arguing as to whether or not a judge or judges, whenever a case is presented to them, do they have a mitzvah? Is it incumbent upon them to suggest to the litigants, would you like to have mediation instead of a ruling, a formal ruling from this court? Would you like to go the path of mediation? Is that something they're obligated to do? Is that a mitzvah to do or not? That's the argument in the Gemara in Sanhedrin. Uman desvirale mitzvah liftsoa. The school of thought, the opinion who holds that it is in fact a mitzvah for the judge in every case to suggest mediation. Mevi raya mi David. He brings a proof from David HaMelech. Dichsiv be, because there's a pasuk about David HaMelech that comes from Sefer Shmuel Beis. You can see the reference in the parentheses. Vayehi David osem mishpat utzedakah lechol amo. And David dispensed justice and righteousness or charity to all of his nation. So the pasuk says, it doesn't just say he dispensed or he rendered justice, rulings It says Mishpat Utztaka. David HaMelech, when people came to him, he gave them Mishpat Utztaka. He gave them justice and charity or righteousness. And then the Gemara continues, Ezehu Mishpat sheyesh imo tzedakah. What is justice that has with it charity? Have omer zeh habitzua. This is a reference to mediation. So the Gemara brings the pasuk about David HaMelech, about him doing Mishpat Utztaka, and it says that shows that when David judged cases, when people came to David HaMelech for him to hear their case, he would try to do bitsua. He would try to do mediation, because that is viewed as a way of intermingling, a way of synthesizing and bringing together mishpat and tzedakah, which is what the pasuk says. He would try to bring together justice and charity, or justice and righteousness, and he would try and convince the parties to have a mediation and a solution to the case and the problem, and through that method. Okay, so let's continue in the next paragraph. Uperasham Maharsha, the famous commentator on the Gemara, the Maharsha, explains as follows: Shemishi yeshbo yiras shamayim, someone who has a fear of heaven, La'olam oseh pshara v'lo din, he will always try to mediate the case and not issue a formal ruling. This is a very powerful statement. The Maharsha is saying that according to this, again, this is one school of thought in the Gemara, according to this school of thought, the judge, if the judge is truly a God-fearing person who has yiras shamayim, he will prefer and try to get the litigants to accept a mediation, as opposed to having the judge or judges issue a formal ruling. V'haporek atzmo min adin lasos pshara, and a judge who separates himself from giving a formal ruling in order to have a compromise solution between the parties, who mevi shalom beino levein aviv shabbat shamayim, he's bringing peace between himself and his Father in heaven. The judge is being told that he's doing a wonderful, beautiful thing and bringing peace into the world. Dibadin, because when a judge or a bezdin issues a formal ruling, lefamim bedin merumeh hu notel mizev and nosein lazeh. It's possible that one of the parties is lying, and therefore the judge will be unlawfully taking something from one of the parties and giving it to the other parties, right? If two people come to court and one of them lies and misrepresents the situation and the reality of the situation and misrepresents the truth, then a judge could be swayed because of that person's words to rule incorrectly and take something, money or property, away from the other party and give it to the liar. In such a case, the sin falls on the litigant who lied, velo b'dayan, and not on the judge. The judge, if he's listening carefully and doing his best to render a fair, correct judgment, and one of the litigants lies to him, and his lies are accepted as being true, then that's not the judge's fault. But sometimes the judge himself might not be careful enough in his ruling. Ve'eno mosun badin, and he might not take enough time and sufficient research into the case to issue the correct ruling. Va'az ha'avon toloi badayon, and then the sin of the incorrect ruling is in fact going to fall on the judge. Aval b'pshara, however, if the judge or judges convince the litigants to have a mediated settlement, and the judges come up with a compromise solution, and it's accepted, he beratzon shnehem. That's that's with the agreement of both parties. Ve'ein kan avon lo lazeh v'lo lazeh. And then in that case, there's no way for there to be a sin against either one of them because they are accepting this mediation and this compromise ruling that the judges develop. Ad kan Lashono, until here is a quote from the Maharsha. So we're learning very important information. We're seeing that for judges, again, at least according to one Manda Amar, according to one opinion in the Gemara, in Sanhedrin, it's a wonderful, beautiful thing. It's a mitzvah for judges to push for there to be a pshara, a mediation between the parties rather than a formal judgment, because a formal judgment can be wrong for lots of reasons. It can be incorrect. And if it's incorrect, the judge could end up, by this incorrect ruling, the judge could end up taking money or property from one person and giving it to the other person unlawfully, inappropriately. In order to avoid that, you do the pshara, you do the mediation, you come up with a settlement that both parties agree to and embrace because they're agreeing to the mediation process, and that's a better way to go. Next paragraph. Umishum hachi pasuk HaShulchan Aruch Hoshen Mishpat Siman Yud Beis, and therefore, in the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch, and the section of Shulchan Aruch called Hoshen Mishpat, Chapter 12, it says, mitzvah lomar lebale dinin. It's a mitzvah to say to the litigants in the case, mitechila, from the very beginning, im yirtu hapshara, if they want to do mediation, if they want to have a compromise proposal from the judges, a compromise solution instead of a formal ruling. So Shulchan Aruch follows this Manda Amar, this opinion in the Gemara and Sanhedrin, that it's a mitzvah to do that. Ubevadai sha'af posuk zeh shel ve'elem hamishpatim, since that's the halacha that judges should always do that and always suggest the bitzua or the pshara, the mediated settlement, then certainly our pasuk of ve'ele hamishpatim yirmos lanu shahapshara hi yoser tova mehadin. It must somehow hint to us that a compromise and a mediation are better than a formal ruling. V'hainu midichsiv asher tosim lifnehem. And this comes from the words in the pasuk, asher tosim lifnehem. These are the laws that you should place before them. Dehoyelo lomar, because the pasuk we would think should have said, asher tishpot osam. These are the laws that you should use to judge them, to judge the people. O asher telamdeim, or these are the laws that you should teach the people. Why did the pasuk say these are the laws that you should place before the people? Ela shekavonoso sheyostim shalom banehem. It used this unusual language of these are the laws asher tosim lifnehem that you should place before them, because it meant to say you should place a peaceful solution between them. V'zehu tosim, and this is the meaning of this is why the Torah uses the word tosim, to place, like we think of the in Birchas Kohanim, we think of v'yosem lecha shalom, Hashem will place for your peace. That's the same idea here. Zera Shimshon is saying when it says asher tosim lifneim, these are the laws that you should place before them. Hashem was hinting to Moshe, these are the laws. Place the laws before them, meaning place peace in front of them, place a peaceful option, place the option of a pshara, a compromise solution in front of them. Inami, or another explanation of asher tosim, sheyosim lifneihem hadin. It's saying place the laws in front of them, tell them the applicable relevant laws, aval lo yishpot osam badin Torah mamish, but don't judge the case according to those laws, exactly, literally according to those laws. So when it says asher tosim, place the laws in front of them, instead of saying judge the people with these laws, the Torah, Hashem was hinting again to Moshe, tell the people the relevant law that's connected to their case, and then say to them, these are the laws, and now let's see if we can come up, would you both agree to come up with a bitzua, a mediated settlement, as opposed to having the judges issue a formal ruling according to these laws. Okay? Now that we understand all of this, we can understand the salkedato, the thing that we might have thought, the reason we might have thought that these laws in our Parsha were not comparable to the laws in Yisrael, were not set at Sinai, at Har Sinai, just like the laws in the previous Parsha. Zera Shimshon is going to explain, now we understand why we might have thought that. Mishpat shel hapshara, because any ruling in a case based on compromise and mediation, eino mi Sinai. We might have thought that whole idea doesn't come from Sinai. The adarabba, just the opposite. Ha-mitzvah shenem rasham, he lishpot osam dafka al kav hadin. We might have thought that the mitzvos that were given on Sinai would be to judge cases strictly according to the Kav Hadin, the letter of the law. Kidi Amrina B'Perek Kama D'Avodah Zarah, as the Gemara says in the first chapter of Maseches Avodah Zarah. Torah dichsiv ba emes. The Gemara over there is talking about the fact that at certain times of the day, Hashem meditates upon the Torah. And when Hashem meditates upon the Torah, which is referred to as emes, as truth, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu oseh bo lifnim mishuras hadin. Then if Hashem judges people at the same time that he's meditating on the truth of the Torah, he doesn't show mercy outside, beyond the letter of the law. So we might think that that Hashem, who does not want to depart from the letter of the law because of the Torah being a Torah of emes, a Torah of truth, so too we might think that Hashem wants all judges to judge cases according to the letter of the law and the literal truth of what's stated in the Torah in terms of how to judge these cases, and not to make a pshara. We might think that Hashem wouldn't want us to as a first step, he wouldn't want judges to suggest a mediation and to suggest a compromise solution, because on Har Sinai, that's where the Torah was given. And so Hashem would want the laws of Har Sinai to be followed exactly and literally without a compromise solution. The diuk asher tosim, and this inference that we made previously in the previous paragraph about these are the laws that you should place in front of the people. And as Zera Shimshon said, you should place is the language that implies you should do compromise proposals. Evshar de'osti l'drash achriti. You'd have to say that those words asher tosim are coming to teach something different, not what we thought above about the mediation. O Kimosha Perush Rashi, or you could embrace Rashi's explanation. What does it mean to place these laws in front of the people? Kishulchan ha'aruch, place the laws. Hashem was telling Moshe, place these laws in front of the people like a set table, umuchan lechol, that's ready for people to sit down and eat. Meaning, don't just tell the people the laws, explain it to them in such a way, and presented the laws of our Parsha of Mishpatim in such a way to the people that it's very accessible, it's easily understood. They can, so to speak, sit down and understand the laws without the laws being so complicated that they get up from the meal and storm away. I can't eat this food. I can't understand these laws. I can't understand Moshe's teachings. So we could say that's what it means, asher tosim. So now we're at a point when the Zera Shimshon has explained to us exactly why we might have thought that the laws in our Parsha and the Mishpatim in our Parsha, the laws and ordinance in our Parsha, we might have thought they were in fact not set at Sinai, because Sinai was all about fire and lightning and emes, total truth, literally. And that's not what Pshara is. That's not this approach of compromise solutions. So that's why you might have thought that our laws in our Parsha were not said on Har Sinai. Next paragraph. Mishum hachi, because of this, hevi hamedrash divrei David. That's why our Medrash Rabbah brought in the words of David from Tehillim. Shahare David shahya oseh pshara. David specifically, we know from the pasuk in Shmuel Beis that was brought previously, David was a person who, when he judged cases, he would try always to make compromises in mediation. Omar Yiras Hashem Tahora Omedis La'ad, and he is the one who said that fear of Hashem is pure and endures forever. And a person who has Yiras Hashem and doesn't want to, God forbid, ever take money from one party and unlawfully give it to the other. If a judge truly has Yiras Hashem and is afraid of making a mistake in judgment, certainly that type of judge will want to make a pshara, a mediation, and a solution that both parties will embrace. After the words Yiras Hashem Tahora Omedis La'ad, that pasuk concludes, Mishpatei Hashem emes tzadku yachdav. The laws of Hashem are true; they are righteous together. So the pasuk seems to be saying that both compromise, pishara, which is alluded to in the first half of the pasuk as being part of Yiras Hashem, of a solution from a judge who has great fear of heaven, together with emes, together with mishpatei emes, they both are correct. V'halo emes rotzalomar din emes lamito. But the word emes, truth, means a true judgment according to exactly the letter of the law, v'lo pshara, and not a mediated solution. Ve'ech tziem tzadku yachdav. So why does the pasuk conclude and say both of these things, the strict judgment, a strict ruling from a judge according to the relevant laws in the Torah, and also compromise solutions, mediation, are both tzadku yachdav. They're both righteous. If you have a ruling from a court, then you don't have a mediation. And when you have a mediation, Haramuza b'yiras Hashem, which is hinted to with the words about Yiras Hashem, ein mishpat emes, then you don't have a judgment of truth. The two things seem to be mutually exclusive. So why are they put together in this pasuk that is brought in by the Medrash Rabbah? Elevadait tzarech lomar, next paragraph, but certainly we see that we need to say, from everything the Zera Shimshon has explained to us, we are now, our eyes should begin to light up with this conclusion we're going to need to draw. The judges need to make compromise solutions which are very close to the law. They shouldn't be so creative with their compromises that it's unrecognizable. It has nothing to do with the Mishpatim in the Torah, the civil laws in the Torah. No, it should be a compromise solution, hakrov eladin, that's close to the laws in the Torah, as it actually states in the Shulchan Aruch, when the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, talks about judges offering mediation. The Shulchan Aruch, Zera Shimshon's teaching us, the Shulchan Aruch says that the judges in mediation should try and stay close to and utilize the civil laws of the Torah. Mishum hachi, because of this, shayach shapir lomar, it is appropriate to say, shegam zos hapshara nikra mishpat emes, that this type of compromise, which is close to the laws and the Mishpatim in the Torah, it can be called Mishpat Emes, a true justice. The Amrina and Tzedek Tirdof, and Chazal say, to support his point, the Zera Shimshon brings an amazing statement from the Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Gemara there brings down the pasuk of Tzedek Tirdof, very famous pasuk, which it says, righteousness you should pursue. And of course, the Gemara wants to explain, why does it repeat the word righteousness? Righteousness you should pursue. Why? Echad ladin ve'echad lepshara. It says righteousness twice because you should use righteousness when you're issuing a formal ruling, and you should use righteousness if you're issuing a mediated settlement, if judges are issuing a compromise solution based on the agreement of the parties. In both cases, you have to follow tzedek, righteousness, and in both cases, it will be considered an act of tzedek, of righteousness. Da'af hapshara tzricha lios tzedek, because even a compromise solution has to be righteous. Klomar, this means to say, lefi tzedek shelo, according to the righteousness of that solution. In other words, obviously, if a judge says, let's come up with a mediated solution, let's have a mediation, and I will use the laws of the Torah to dictate what the solution is, well, that's a dictated ruling. So that's not what is meant. What is meant is, if you're going to shift from a din, from a formal ruling by the judge or the Beis Din, and you're going to have a pshara, a mediation and a compromise solution, then the judges should formulate the compromise keeping in mind the laws of the Torah, but using enough flexibility to be able to get the parties, each of them, to come away feeling satisfied with the ruling. Klomar, that's what we said. Klomar, this means to say lefi tzedek shelo, according to the justice of the way mediation is done. V'hainu mishpatei Hashem, and this is what is meant in the end of the pasuk from Tehillim, where it says, the judgments of Hashem emes are true. Lefi amitus shelo, the judgments of Hashem are true according to the truth of the particular type of ruling. There's the truth of rulings which are based on strict din, that judges can issue rulings based on. And then there are court cases that can end with emes, with truth based on a mediation, a compromise solution. The tzedek ve'emes hakol inyon echad, because justice or righteousness and truth, they're the same thing. Umishum hachi omar akosu ve'ela hamishpatim. And now we understand why the first pasuk in our Parsha said ve'ela hamishpatim. And these are the ordinances. Lomar, to say, shehu mosif u'machaber im ha'inyan harishon. The laws in our Parsha of Mishpatim all connect perfectly with the laws in Parshas Yisro, which were given on Sinai and were said to be pure emes. Dahainu haseres hadibro shehem ikar Torah. What mitzvos were giving in Yisro? What are we talking about? The haseres hadibros, which are the fundamental ikar of the Torah. Kedei lahoros lanu mitzvah hapshara hakrova ladin. And this was said in order to teach us the mitzvah for judges to suggest and to push for mediation and compromise proposals from the judges, which are krova ladin, which stay close to the actual laws. Shegam hi ne'amra b'Sinai. That idea was also given at Sinai. So and we'll stop here. So the Zera Shimshon has answered the first two of his questions that he posed in the very beginning, and he has shown us what was bothering the Medrash Rabbah about the pasuk of Ve'ela HaMishpatim that caused it to bring in the pasuk from Tehillim about Yiras Hashem. And he's also said, he also answered the third question. He also has said to us, it specifically mentioned David HaMelech, because David HaMelech is someone who we learn used to push for mediation and compromise settlements. And David HaMelech also talked about Yiras Hashem. And so Yiras Hashem and the emes of the Torah's laws can all be synthesized together and can all work together. And judges, whether they issue a pshara hakrova ladin, a mediated settlement which stays close to the Torah's laws, or they issue a formal ruling, a din emes lamito, a formal ruling based on the laws of the Torah, either way, that can be called both tzedek ve'emes, both righteous and truthful. And all of that comes together in the little tiny excerpt from the Medrash Rabbah, with, of course, the Zera Shimshon's deep and lengthy explanation. And believe it or not, even though he answered his first three questions, and then he goes on for much, much more arichos at great length to discuss different questions that he raises and different issues and sources that come up later in this piece, which God willing we'll do another time. Yasher koach for joining in the learning in the Zera Shimshon this week. Be'ezus Hashem, we look forward to learning together in the Zera Shimshon on next week's Parsha.